All right. Let's see, all right.
Are you all set, Tim?
All right, good evening. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight's Thursday, February 13th. We have a public hearing for an application for a variance for land off of Hope Avenue. Lawrence S. Crowley, variance of frontage requirement for proposed subdivision of the property into 4 lots. After that hearing, we'll go into some miscellaneous discussion of other businesses, a number of things in the packet. Stephen, would you mind reading the legal note?
Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing notice. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held on Thursday, February 13th, 2020 at 7 p.m. by the Oxford Zoning Board of Appeals at the Oxford Town Hall, 325 Main Street, Oxford, Mass. To consider the application of Lawrence S. Crowley for the property owned by him located off Hope Ave, Oxford, Mass. Identified as Assessors Map 46, Parcel D03. The applicant requests the variances in accordance with MGL Chapter 40A and Chapter 10 dimensional requirements. Table 6 of the Oxford zoning bylaw to vary the frontage requirement for the proposed subdivision of the property into 4 lots. The property is located in the R2 residential zoning district. The application can be viewed in the office of the town clerk or down management department during normal office hours. Anyone desiring to be heard on this matter should appear at the place, date, and time designated to submit written comments to the board before the date of the hearing. See masspublicationnotices.org for legal notice. Board of Appeals, Town of Oxford, Mass. To the applicants of the Zoning Board of Appeals, you are hereby advised of the following provisions of the Oxford zoning bylaws. Appeals to the Zoning Board of Appeals must be filed within 20 days from the date or order of decision which is being appealed, specifying the grounds thereof. Variances. In order to grant a variance from the requirements of this bylaw, the Zoning Board of Appeals must find that all of the following conditions have been met. A, there are unique circumstances related to the soil condition, shape, or topography of such land or structures that B, especially affected such land or structures but do not generally affect the zoning district in which it is located, and that C, a literal enforcement of the provisions of this bylaw would involve substantial hardship, financial or otherwise, but not of a personal nature, to the petitioner or appellant, and that D, desirable relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, and without nullifying or substantiating, detargeting from the purposes of this bylaw. In accordance with the Chapter 40A, Section 15 of Mass General Laws, you are hereby advised that any person aggrieved by the decision of the board relative to this matter must file an appeal as provided for Section 17 of said Chapter 48 within 20 days after the date of the filing of this decision in the office of the town clerk.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
All right, who do I have the pleasure of working with?
This is Lawrence Crowley, he's the landowner, and my name is Dan Crowley, and he asked me to help him out.
Okay.
We've been working on this for years, but I've been in the real estate business for 48 years, and been before various boards in town for...
Okay, thank you. Let me go through the package just to make sure we're all on the same page with the information we have. We have the application with a note to see the attachment. I'm assuming the attachment is probably the letter to the Board of Appeals. I'm going to probably read this for the audience just because they don't have access to it. This is from Mr. Crowley, dated December 30th, 2019, to the Board of Appeals. This land meets all dimensional requirements according to zoning regulations. The 150-foot frontage is parallel to Hope Ave, but there is an abandoned railroad bed 60 feet wide owned by National Grid. National Grid has agreed to convey 2 rights of ways to provide access to the 4 lots. Without the variance, this land will be of no use. The original land taking for the railroad had a provision that if the railroad was abandoned, the land would revert back to the abutters. In 1959, through an act of the legislature, the agreement was vacated. Unfortunately, the landowners in Oxford did not have a seat at the table, and their rights were lost. It's taken almost 4 years to survey the parcels, numerous conversations and paperwork to reach this agreement with National Grid. I believe the dimensional requirements should satisfy the intent of the lot requirements. Then we have a multi-page copy of the easement and agreement with National Grid. We have that. And we have a copy of the deed of the property purchased in 2009. We do have the letter from the zoning enforcement officer denying the original application, stating that a variance from zoning board of appeals would be the appeal road. Also, one note that's important on here is that the plan, let's see, even after, based on the decision of the Board of Appeals tonight, if it is approved, additionally, you would need approval of the subdivision plan by the planning board. Okay, so that's stated on there. Then we have a copy of the Oxford zoning map showing the property highlighted. We have a statement from the tax collector in Oxford that the taxes, property taxes are current on the property. We have a list of the abutters on the property, who I assume some of the folks are here tonight. And then we have an engineered plan, blown up plan showing what you're proposing to do. The other two things I would add is that Mary provided tonight, I think she provided copies of both of these. One is a more detailed letter from the zoning enforcement officer, I think trying to clarify his position, and then some information from Mary amongst the town planners about, I guess, how other towns maybe handle some of the A&Rs, approval not required. All right, so I'd like you to go forward and maybe help us understand what you're trying to do.
Well, this has been in play for about 5 years. Mr. Crowley, because of his age, been paying taxes on this land forever, and like he's told me, he says, I've outlived my savings, you know, so every year it's a, you know, between his home and his other land down there, it's a hardship for him to pay the taxes. But just to, this would not be the first time that there's been, you know, that this has been a problem. This is your zoning map, and this was the old Boston and Albany Railroad Webster branch. And this was built years ago to go from Webster all the way to Gardner, Massachusetts for the Slater Mills, which back at the time, I would say Webster, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was the Silicon Valley, so to speak. You know, that was a high-tech area. But they get the beef with the Norwich and Worcester Railroad, and they helped fund and have the railroad built all the way to Gardner. As you think about it today, it'd be impossible to do. But the railroads have as much rights as the government, so they took it by eminent domain. And there's a provision in the deed back then that if it ever ceased to be a railroad, it would revert back to the property owners. Well, you know, that's the first problem. It never happened because Massachusetts had lobbyists, and they through a special act of the legislature, as you can see in the deed there, in 1959, they were able to purchase this for their rights of ways. They've never used this as a right of way. Now, I was the developer of the land where IPG Photonics is. And it took us 3 years to straighten out with them and where Fabrico is and the back entrance to, another back entrance to IPG. We had to pay them $10,000 so they would consider our plans. It's very tough to work with. I'm talking about the IPG thing, but eventually we got it resolved. And there was a driveway. The interruption was only the 60 feet. IPG, at one time, and then IPG, and then Fabrico. We own the frontage parallel to the railroad. Then we skip the 60 feet into the land. But, that was an example of 60 feet the railroad, and we had to verify the right of way. It was on a plan, but, we had to make it wider. And then there's other things that have happened over the years, maybe not variances, but an example is, we can say the whole town, or half the town, is in error because the Providence and Worcester Railroad owns their line, and the streets go over it, okay? So we went out and we finally were able to talk to someone from National Grid. And it took us years to find the right person. And then they came back to us and said, well, okay, we want you to survey our railroad bed, and then survey your land, and then we'll talk about what we can do. So our first thing was to make it easy for everyone was we wanted to buy the right of way through Mr. Crowley's land. And they came back and they gave us a complete telephone number on it.
What does that mean?
Over $200,000.
Okay.
Okay, so
Contingents.
this is after several $1,000s in legal fees and surveys and all that has gone on. So then they came back. They said, look, we'll give you 42 feet here, 42 feet here. You can put a common driveway into the two lots, and that's all we could get. So that's what we presented to the planning board. They were sympathetic, and they said, well, go to you. Now, previously, when we started on this journey, Ronald DeSantis was the building inspector. He said, I look at this as a utility strip. You get your road, it's just an easy one to see. Hey, you got a whole bath, and then you get this utility strip, right? So I look at the utility strip and National Grid just the way I look with the roadway. National Grid has the right of eminent domain, just like a town does, all right? Something Mr. Balkunas wrote, I just wrote down that part of the provision, it went by and I wrote one phrase down, is it does not, an approval for, an opinion of approval was that it does not err or, quote it exactly.
Derogate from the intent of the bylaw?
Yeah, it doesn't impact the zoning district. So all these lots are, they have the 150-foot frontage required, parallel to the road. You have, they're over the 40,000 square feet by almost double in some cases. You got the river in the back, okay? So we're talking a very low impact, 4 house lots, all right? Now, the other thing that was always, that came into zoning, I remember when I built the subdivision in Charlton, where the roads are parallel to Oxford. And I argued, I said, gee, I've got 150 to 175 feet of frontage, and you want a roadway 32 feet wide. How does that help anyone? I asked for 24. Well, no, they didn't, they wanted a 30-foot road. 2 years later, they had a master plan, and Dr. Mullins came out from Amherst with his group, and he says, roads should be 20 to 24 feet, and frontages should be less. It's called a cluster development, or I forget the other fig, but and this is so you don't have as much stormwater management and so forth and so on. So it's proposed here is just two 42 by 60 foot areas, 2,400 feet to gain access into these lots. Now, years ago, when there were 2 houses built on Sacarappa Pond through a 15-foot right-of-way, okay? That did not change the history of the world. In fact, Frank Morgan lived in one house and Dennis Powell lived in the other house. So, and then the other thing being, Google Maps, if you go up Sutton Ave, across from Orchard Hill,
So just to clarify this, each of these two 42-foot wide easements would satisfy as a common driveway for two of the lots?
that's right.
Okay.
And I mean, so this is nothing new. If you look at Sutton Ave, look at all these houses in the old apple orchard that were built on the way back with hundreds of feet from the roadway. Now, the other thing is, you know, the driveway would have, if Mr. Crowley had been able to buy his 600 feet of frontage from the power company, you know, this would go to the planning board, they could stamp it, and it would be an A&R. But because we couldn't reach that agreement, this is what we're living with.
And what's the intent of this, to show?
Well, no, this is that, you know, when we say it's not gonna impact the zoning, this already exists in town, and this is, you know, recent history within probably the last 15 or 20 years. So,
I know, but what are you trying to show us?
what I wanted to
That
show,
there's-
these are like 40-foot estate lots, I believe. You know, so I mean, basically, you'd have the same thing on a shorter version, but you'd be,
You mean these are, 40-foot right-of-ways to go back here?
driveways. Well,
Yeah.
they're not, the only difference is, we have perfected the right-of-way by buying the right-of-way.
Yeah, in other words, they don't have the frontage out here.
Yeah,
for-
there's not frontage there, but I mean, it's, and this was, I think when people started going to common driveways or estate lots is because, hey, all this land is sitting here going nowhere. And, you know, this is a way to allow it. So, we're not asking for anything unusual, we're just saying, okay, you know, Mr. Crowley would like to be able to sell 4 house lots and, you know, and be able to have you know, leave in a reasonable comfort without having to sell his home. And, I mean, that, you know, that's sort of a hardship. I know maybe because you're not supposed to take in consideration economic hardship, but, you know, what is the use of this land afterwards? You know, now that he's got the right of way, does he sell the gravel off for a gravel pit? Does he, you know, could someone in this zone put a campground there? There's other things they could do that would not be house lots. So all we're asking for is a variance so he could, you know, he could create 4 house lots.
Do you know what the zoning is in this area?
I believe that's, you used to call it suburban. What do you-
R1,
R1.
Sutton Ave, this area of
I
Sutton
go
Ave
back
is
to it was
R1.
just residential.
Because I think on our chart, R2 is suburban now, but
R1 is rural residential,
residential, yeah.
R2 is suburban.
okay.
If I could through the chair, does it otherwise meet the acreage? You know, if that was a roadway where the Mass Electric Company owns it, would it otherwise meet?
I believe it does. If you look at
Yeah,
that
because
A and R
yeah,
lot
it's-
for
yeah, it's-
R2,
Yeah, 150 and 40,000.
40,000 square foot lot size is
So
what
Each one of the lots are 1.7 acres.
Yeah.
So if that railroad bed was not there and the property abutted the existing Hope Ave, he could do an A and R lots, he could subdivide it with the frontage.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to state right now? Otherwise, I'll open
Well,
it.
just I'll show you, for example, I think I gave you this, I was looking at it, but, you know, here's another lot, this is the one up behind the Harrington Healthcare. You know, that's just, you know, a long driveway off of that, so, and then the other thing
Yeah,
is.
but are you referring to like what are commonly known as pork chop lots?
No, because we meet the 150 feet parallel.
I think
You know, it's-
Mr. Silverman means what you're showing us on these others.
Yeah, those are probably pork chop
So
lots.
if I look
yeah.
at this, you've got your regular size lots, and then you've got your long driveways that appear to have a lot more lot area, and that would be
But less
pork
frontage.
chop lot.
But less frontage.
Right, reduced,
But there is frontage, is what the point is with a pork chop lot.
reduced frontage.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But not on the street.
See, this is
At the
where the
street.
railroad goes by.
Those are wide enough?
It has to have a minimum of 50 feet of frontage.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and it comes
All
right
the
beside
driveways
Wilson,
is
and
10 I
then it
measured
comes
it,
out, goes over
10
Worcester
foot.
Road, and then
No,
it
that
comes
one
out.
strip, sorry.
It's supposed to have 50
Two
feet of
conversations.
frontage.
It may be pretty tight.
You gotta share these, I ran out of ink. This is, down in town.
All right, would you be okay, I'm gonna open it up to the board for questions.
Yeah, I
And
think,
then if you have anything you wanna add, you can certainly add.
Okay, we just wanted to give you the history and the
Yeah,
background.
no, okay, that's good, thank you. I'm gonna start with Stephen today.
Great, thanks. On the railroad bed, the vacant railroad bed, is anybody using that, like, if their bikes go down there, or four-wheelers, or
And once in a while, people hike down there.
like,
Yeah.
It's, people walk. There hasn't been no dirt bikes, snowmobiles, racing vehicles, hot rod, you know, for almost, I'd say almost 30 years now. Because it's blocked up.
yeah. I know a lot of towns convert them into walkways now.
Well, that's fine. The idea for this, you gotta remember, no matter which way I go with it, is the Mass Electrics is gonna have a right-of-way through there. So that means that if the town wants to put a dirt bike road or a bicycle path, a walking path, that's still allowed.
Right.
That's their land. I'm just got the right-of-ways to
Yeah.
get into the, that's right.
They're just giving
So
you the
that still would
access,
be allowed,
Yeah.
you know.
just giving you the access to get into those 4 lots, and that's it.
That's it, that's all it was.
And the lots themselves, if you take that railroad bed out of the equation and it was a regular street access,
Would be whole path. I'd have I got,
You'd have
the
every-
lots are 150 feet wide.
yeah, so you have all the,
Everything,
you
and
need.
these lots, I was just gonna do what the town required, 40,000 square foot. Then I would come in from my house out this way around the back, so of no value to me. So these lots are all 1.7 acres each one,
And good sized lots.
way past what's necessary.
Yeah. Are those level lots? Or lots basically?
It's fairly level, yes.
All right.
There was some sand, Ben T-Ball used to own it before
Yeah,
and he took some sand out of there, but, you know, people looked at it and it's fairly flat.
yeah.
I get, from what I can see, when I ride up every day, I look at it and I can see through the pine trees and stuff, so the 4 houses or even maybe 1 house on all 4 lots.
Yeah, it's all good drainage up there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm all set. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Stephen. Al?
The plan, you may have referred to this. You own land that's abutting this to the south.
Yeah, to the south, yeah,
That's,
yeah.
do you have access to that lot?
No,
That
that's
land?
my lot, no, that's the 5th house lot, but I didn't get a right of way into that. Only
Do you think
because,
you'd want to keep a right of way from this easement?
well, not really, I
So
don't wanna
does
put
lot-
anything in there that's gonna cost money.
Well, when you sell
It's
lot
hard
four,
enough to-
when you sell lot 4, you could keep an easement, so you could drive down, get
Uh,
onto your
well,
other land.
that's from what I understand from the power company, that we would go this way, and they said there would be no problem getting a right of way for that. And then, when I went through here to get those 2 right of ways, we're talking 4 years, lawyers, and, you know, it just, you know what it is. And it's unbelievable, really. But that lot, if my daughter wants it, I mean, it's twice the size as one of these. And then I still own the other 18 acres. That, there was a
You
problem
feel
there.
comfortable that you
Yeah.
can reach that land somehow.
Oh, I don't, yeah.
Well,
It's not in
he's
the-
he's already got an adverse possession because he used to have a, he had a structure there years ago. And how long you been there since, what, 59?
I've been there, well, 59 was when the railroad What,
No, no, I mean, when did you buy your house?
Oh, way back in 67, I think. I've been down there forever.
Now, when Ben owned it, he passed through over the railroad bed to get to this property.
Never had a problem, never had a problem. I mean, I've had railroad people down there, I've had everybody down there looking at, and you know, they, of course, they're only doing their job, they don't,
Well, the water company was in there last year testing for water. And they came right through this driveway, over the railroad, and, I mean, you know, this is one of these things, National Grid realizes they own it when someone comes to them, but,
Did you, when you were talking to National Grid, did you ever consider that they could sell you the property, keep all the rights?
yep, that was the
Yeah,
first thing we
use of
did.
it.
Yeah, we said, look, you can have a use, you can sell it someday for a, you know, a pathway, a bike trail, you know, and then, you know, the problem is, you go up and down the food chain, you know, you'd say three guys, oh, that sounds good, and then some lawyer says, well, hey, we gotta think about liability issues and all that stuff, and how we, and then we start at the beginning, you know? Then there's a new group, you know, and there's one constant guy that was always there, and he tried to do what he could to help us, and came back, he's, all I can give you 242 foot, and I said, why not 50? He said, no, that's what they told me. And now everybody else is gone, he's the last guy standing, they keep cutting people, you know? I don't know if you do business with National Grid, but my friends in North Oxford, you know, they built a new office building, the surveyors and engineers, they waited 6 months for a transformer. I mean, you know, hey, try to get someone on the phone, you know? But, so this is, hey, we would have liked to have just made it easy, but we tried.
Now, whatever we do, no matter what we do, the planning board has to have some kind of control.
No, we realize that, but you know, they were kind of, correct me if I'm wrong there, but when we talked to them, it's like, okay, it's a conundrum. Okay, what goes first, this, that, and the other thing, and when we first came in over 3 years ago, you know, they've been sympathetic to us, we say, okay, how do we do this legally? So we said, okay, we'll go to the building inspector, then go to the ZBA, and then, you know, too bad we didn't have everybody all in one room together and say, okay, how can we make this work? But, you know, we'll go with whatever suggestion you have.
You gotta jump through all these hoops to get where you wanna go. In old school,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not old school,
Yeah.
but old school it would have been done.
I could almost look at this similar to when the trolley cars ran up and down the side over here.
Yeah.
Having the trolley company say, we got that, we own it. None of those houses are legal.
Yeah.
But I like that from here, that you've got that going for you. They're really not working with you. And as a utility, they should be working with the public.
Well, that's what I think. I think that's the main hardship is that they won't, you know, they control our destiny. And so, like I said, this is, you know, we would have liked to, like your suggestion, believe me, that was the second thing we thought of. Okay, you don't want to sell it to us, sell it to us and keep all your rights, you know? And like I said, that got through 3-person, it got to the 4th guy in legal, and probably, maybe he said, wow, this is gonna be a lot of work, I don't wanna do this, I don't know. But, hey, that's, it's been a long, frustrating journey.
I have no other questions.
Thanks, Al. David?
Thank you. So if the ZBA approves, is the planning board, they're gonna look at it as an A&R plan?
Yeah, I guess from what I read from Central Mass Planning, I guess we'd have to go back and present it as an A&R plan. And I imagine that time there'd probably be discussions about the common drive, if we have to do that design. But is that, did you interpret it that?
All right, so I did some more research on it, and the building inspector provided his letter tonight, and
there's a couple
If the
things. in the pack.
variances were granted, the applicant would also be required to submit a subdivision plan to the planning board and obtain their approval of the subdivision if the zoning board of appeals finds that each lot meets all of the requirements. And then I also printed out for the board members and provided to you some correspondence that I'm privy to on mass planners, group discussion type of a thing. And most of the recommendations in these emails is that if the ZBA grants the variance, the applicant would have to go to planning board for subdivision and get a waiver of the frontage requirement.
Because technically, there's not frontage on the street.
Correct, right.
But
And
weren't they,
the
weren't they in
subdivision-
favor of it?
The subdivision rules and regulations give the planning board the power to waive strict compliance with the regulations.
Yeah, so basically.
That's odd. I would have thought that that if the ZBA gives approval, that the planning board would look at it as an A&R plan, because essentially the relief that he's getting is, hey, you essentially, we're blessing this as frontage on a roadway. So then it should only be an A&R plan.
So I understand what you're saying, but there are strict rules and regulations with Mass General Law and the subdivision control law that's governed by Mass General Law. And I believe even though you as a board can grant the dimensional relief, still has to go through the subdivision process where the planning board could grant a waiver of the frontage.
I think our discussion with the planning board, that's what they were waiting for, a reason too. And I think, you know, I believe that their decision would be parallel to yours. And, you know, they've been sympathetic. Well, we know what you're trying to do, we know how you're doing it. And, you know, it probably, if we had that opinion from Central Mass Planning before we went to the planning board, we all would have been better informed, and they probably would have said, go to the ZBA, and if they approve it, we'll approve it. That's just my feeling after how many meetings we've met with them. We've been before the planning board 3 or 4 times with this, talking about our progress and the best way to do it and what we're trying to do, so, you know, we're happy, you know, if your decision agreed with our plan, we don't have a problem going back to the planning board.
There were 2 packets that Mary provided tonight. I haven't had a chance to go through them, but one is more clarification from the zoning enforcement officer with, you know, different case law, different cases that are presented in that. And then Mary provided a packet with kind of some informal information amongst the mass planners that talks about this. So again, I haven't had a chance to look at these, we received them tonight, but that's, I think, what's being referenced here right now.
I had some other questions about 42 feet. You tried to obtain 50.
Yeah.
How did they arrive at 42 feet?
God only knows, I mean.
Are we talking a dart against a wall?
You know, I don't know, I think maybe they took a percentage of what they own there and said, okay, if it's, you know, let's say if it was 1,600 feet, well, we'll give them 5% or 2% or whatever it was. That was never clear to us, it just said, look, great. And the guy that tried, he says, look, he says, I can give you 242. I think he was looking at, if it had to be, and he had the zoning books in Oxford, I think he said, okay, if you need 40 feet to put in a 20-foot common driveway, I'll give you 42. You know, so in case you have a grade problem or something, but.
My only concern is whether the width of it from 50 down to 42 would be a concern for fire or police.
Well, here's an example. We took that into, we figured that was gonna come up about the width. So we went around measuring roads in town, right? Charlton Street, you know, probably Charlton Street and Sutton Ave, your busiest roads, with the exception of Main Street. That paved area is 35 feet, okay? Now you get to Wheelock Street and roads like that, you know, they're 20, 22, 18 feet. So, you know, so you look at that, and I mean,
But, and I hear you, but unfortunately, that, I mean, when was Charlton Street laid out? When was Sutton Ave laid out?
I know, but it's working pretty good, isn't it? I mean, the,
Well,
So-
they
so-
finally squared away Charlton Street.
yes. But what I'm saying is, David, is we got 2 single-family homes, okay? And, you know, on, let's say, a 22 or 24-foot wide driveway, all right? That's nowhere near the 10,000 cars a day, I'm just guessing. Do you know what it is, Mick? Coming out Sutton Ave? I mean, it used to be 5,000 in Market Basket came to town, you know, in Home Depot. But I mean, I don't know what the traffic is there, so I'm saying, I mean, here's an example, okay? And not to be a wise guy, but, you live in Rawson's old house, right? What I call Rawson's growing up. 262 Main Street or whatever.
264.
Okay, I grew up in 258 where, you know, your in-laws lived down. Okay, and you service on that, you service your offices in the back, whatever, right? I mean, how, is that 12 feet wide or 14 feet wide? So I'm saying, look, you know, as far as an ambulance getting in there or something, you know, a Peterbilt dump truck is 8 feet wide, you know, so taking that into consideration, I'm sure, hey, in a perfect world, it'd be great to have a 20-foot wide road for every driveway, but we don't, you know, we don't live in that world.
I'm not disputing that.
No, I know that, I'm just trying to make an example.
Almost every one of those roads on Sutton Ave, and I measure them all. What's
Outside the roads?
Well,
going up
the
to these
drive- the
long
driveways.
driveways?
Oh, the
They're
driveways, yeah.
barely 10 feet wide. I'm not saying, that some ambulance could easily maybe go up, where would he turn around? If you look at the drawings, where do they turn around? Where's the big fire truck turn around when they get to the top of that hill? So where am I? I'm giving somebody, you know, whole road to build into the house if they need to.
I, as a single board member, don't have a problem, but I think that it is right to ask the safety individuals in town simply to chime in and say, we see no problem because, you know, a normal width of fire truck is X feet or an ambulance is X feet, so, you know, we're good. I think it's appropriate, given the uniqueness of the situation. I mean, I guess I've been on I was on the planning board for a bunch of years. I've been on ZBA now for a while, and I've never seen one like this. It makes sense to be able to do something. Unquestionably, it makes sense to be able to do something rather than having dead land. My 2 cents.
Well,
Susan, just to clarify, that's why we figured 42 feet, you know, you could put a, you know, I mean, whether it has to be 24, 30 feet, 38 feet, I mean, 35 feet would be overkill anyway. You know, because you don't need a Sutton Ave or a Charlton Street to get into a single, to a single.
Absolutely not, I agree,
So,
yep.
But, and, you know, I know where you're coming from, I mean, it's, you're the devil's advocate, you know, but, you know, if there's a criteria of some kind, okay, there's room to remedy it.
did you want to say something?
Just to put this in perspective,
Please.
because I come up with some of the same things you were, I finally decided that's really the planning board's, people who served on the planning board, responsibility
When they do the
when they
subdivision?
do the subdivision to make
See,
sure.
I don't agree that it should be subdivision approval, because essentially you're looking for the ZBA to say, hey, it's okay that you're not on a street. But
You know,
You have a point.
If they don't
You have a point.
But if they don't go for subdivision, maybe we should get into all of those issues also.
No, but if we're being told that they're gonna be required to submit for subdivision approval, that really does become
I thought they said they weren't going subdivision.
no, but according to one of the legal opinions, they said we did, after your approval, we do have to go back to the planning board. If anything, to have them sign the plan as an agreement. But, you know, one other thing to consider, right? Let's say we were just bringing this before the planning board, you know, with 150 feet frontage, and people putting driveways in. That's not even a consideration for safety, you know, so, yeah. But I mean, you know, but basically, like I said, this was the best we could do, you know, so.
Can I add to this? Because when you're coming in here, would it be advisable to put like a little circle at the end of this 42-foot? Not that you're not made to pave it.
Yeah,
Pave any way they want, just a loop that they can turn around.
Yeah,
No
I mean,
matter what, why didn't you tell me he has to put a horseshoe in
And
there?
then when they, in actuality, if you had to, plan board said, well, you gotta put a road in, you'd have to do that anyway.
yeah,
You'd just be negotiating how little pavement you need. I don't think you'd need much, because if two people are serving a driveway.
yeah, well, the other
If the
thing
two
is,
people that own this get in an argument with each other, it's gonna be hard to come in and turn around.
well, you know, hey, you just do that with extending an easement.
But if you had an easement right there, and then they could do whatever they wanted. Let's say 10 years from now, they said, well, we've been fighting this long enough, let's put in a road for us, the two people, be the one that you're doing.
Well, I
Just
mean,
put in a turnaround there, and
I think,
and we've had the town, I can point out a lot of places where the town has used an easement, which we pointed out up here, where the Morgan and
yeah,
Powers lived. They had an easement to get to their road. We've accepted that. I think that was on a planning board I was on. That you could use an easement to build a road at the end of.
sure. Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we'd be opposed if the motion said that we would extend the right of way, you know, for that future conundrum, if you
Because
want
if
to
you,
call it.
if you had a loop and you had to go to it,
Yeah,
the frontage reduces considerably.
yeah,
I think it's like 50% maybe.
yeah, yeah.
So it wouldn't take much of a circle. If you had to go that route,
Yeah.
I don't think you will, from what I heard.
Well, it would add to the frontage.
Well, they'd have, if they had a loop there, and the frontage is greatly reduced, I think you get a 50% reduction if it's 60-foot radius or less or more.
Yeah, 60 feet, I think,
60
so if they
feet,
went
yeah.
down.
So they'd have the frontage if they had to do it. But I would rather leave it up to the two owners that they could do it in the future and take an argument.
Yeah, it does say 50%. It reduces it to 50%.
Can I just add something?
Let's go.
Even though we're looking at this map, and it's 42 feet, it's hard to get the visual effect. This room here's got to be 20 feet. You figure the tiles, I don't know if those tiles are 2 feet apart.
Yeah, the two, and you got one, you probably got 21 feet
Yeah, so if you visualize,
twice that.
right, so, I mean, you look from wall to wall and you put a ambulance or whatever that's 8 feet, and now you're going into the driveway that's gonna open up, you have more than enough room. I mean, I'm just trying to get that visual effect instead we're looking at here. So the 42 feet, I think, is well deserved right there. I mean, yeah, you always want a couple more feet, you know, but, and just to give you that impression of it, that you look around and, you know, you have the exact access to go in without squeezing by anything. Especially, like you said, double the size. So
Any
double,
truck is only 8 feet wide.
and so double this
I
room.
don't care what dump trucks, any truck you've got, a
Yeah.
garbage truck, they're 8 feet wide.
Yeah, so you got the room. You double this room,
Oh, you got plenty
40
of room,
feet
I-
and- you know?
I'm not the one that's arguing.
Just trying to get a different perspective on it instead of looking at that. So to me, you got more than enough room for access to go in now.
All right, thanks, Steve. You all set, David, or?
I am, thank you.
Dan, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions right now, although I just want to maybe clarify a couple things. We're talking 4 lots, so am I reading in this paperwork that they'd be requesting 4 variances, a separate variance for
According
each
to
lot?
the building commissioner, yes.
So that would have to be referenced as what, lot 1, variance for lot 1, a variance for lot 2, variance for lot 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
each.
and Mass Electric, National Grid owns that 60-foot wide
Yep.
bed now?
Yeah, that's it, they bought it from the railroad in 1959.
Well, another point was, why this has sort of always been unfair. If you look at Old Howard Road, of course, I think what also precipitated this not being a railroad was a 1955 flood. And then, the takings for the flood control and so forth and so on. But you got Old Howard Road, that is right on this bed, okay? And we should have measured that road, I don't think that's 18 feet, then you have an interruption. And then, of course, the Chafees, I don't live in Charlton anymore, but I'm a native, but, I lived half my life here. But anyway, the Chafees, when I was a kid, they were the industrialists in the town. Well, they got protected because coming out of the Chafee Pond, that railroad bed, they always had a right of way to Clara Park Road. Then, of course, you went into the pond, and then there were smaller lots until you get to Auburn. But, this got left off, but probably at the time, there were only 2 houses down there anyway. But not, your house wasn't even built, might have been the one.
Well, the house that's, that I owned at one time and I sold to another person, it is abuts this.
That's right here.
And there's no way, he abuts the whole railroad. He has a driveway that goes in, a right of way supposedly. But his house has no right of way on any land at all except for the railroads.
And the rear of the land abuts what on the map is shown as the French River?
French River goes 3,000 feet, the whole length of my property all the way down.
So there's no access from the back.
I have access from, no, there wouldn't be no access in this, if I sell it, the full lots all the way back to the river, no. That would be their land.
All right, I'd like to open it up to the audience. I don't know if there's anybody that wants to speak on the matter or ask questions.
Yeah,
I would ask you come up and state your name and address, just so
Okay.
you know. Yeah, actually, the microphones are not on, right?
Right.
Okay, first of all, I apologize. I'm not really a public speaker and I get a little bit
Neither are
nervous
we.
and uncomfortable in this situation. I just want to address a couple things. First, I want to tell you how it's going to personally.
Sir,
Oh,
sir,
sorry,
what's
my
your-
name's Mitch Story and I live at 8 Matthews Circle.
Okay,
My house would be directly across the river to where these houses are going to
Okay.
go. If you want me to show you, if you can see it.
sure.
So there's French River Circle. So right here,
Yeah,
at the end of this road, I think that's on Matthews Circle. My eyes on it.
Yeah, that is.
It's right there. So right across
okay.
the
So that's
river
right there, okay.
is
Yep.
where we located.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so to
Sorry,
be
go ahead,
totally
sir.
honest, I want to address on 2 sides. One, I want to tell you how it's going to affect me because there is personal
Yes.
effect that I look at it.
Yep.
If there were 4 houses there already at this moment, and even when I bought my house, it probably wouldn't have prevented me from buying my house. But the fact is, I did buy my house. I was told that no one, when I bought it, could build there because of the 60-foot. I knew no one was going to build on the other side and no one behind my house because it's the flood zone. So that was a positive for me purchasing the house. Now, again, if there were 4 houses there already, I probably still would have bought it. But it's gonna take, I don't know how long before 4 houses are actually gonna be put up. That's years that I'm gonna be hearing machinery banging and whatever on my weekends hanging out with my family. So it's personally gonna affect me on that level. Secondly, you have the French River right there. I spend a lot of time on the French River. At one time, Oxford was really trying to actually promote people using the French River. They helped invest with, down there on Dudley Road with the, I think it was the French River Connection. They bought or sold the land so they could put in a canoe launching point there. And the applicant mentioned something about like IPG and, you know, there and that. I've noticed myself coming up and down the river. That's a distraction of the enjoyment of coming up and down that river. So now with the time frame of putting up 4 houses, that's also gonna take some of the enjoyment for not me, but anyone who enjoys using that river. And there is quite a few people who go up and down that river. With that being said, if all zoning laws, his property met all zoning laws, even though it personally affected me, I might not be happy about it, but, you know, what could I do? It meets all the zoning laws, so I look at it now in reference to the zoning laws. From everything I could tell, and I just got this notice like 7 days ago, so I really didn't have a lot of time to research time frames or anything like that. But according to what I can tell, when the land was purchased, he could have never built there. When he purchased the land in that area, there were other areas of the property that he purchased and was able to build. But when he bought the land, he could not have built there, okay? Years go by, and I get it, the gentleman, it's 4 beautiful pieces of property that you can make a good amount of money on. I can understand why he wants to be able to. But you have a zoning law says you need the frontage. When he purchased it, he didn't have the frontage, he knew he didn't have the frontage, he knew he couldn't build there. Well, years later, he still doesn't have the frontage. If you're gonna give him a variance on this, I have to question, why do you even have that rule on the books? Because there's nothing that I see here that is actually special, out of the ordinary, where he might have been lied to when he purchased the property. He might have, you know, where you could say, wow, you know, that wasn't fair to him. He bought the property in a certain situation, couldn't build on it. The laws today, he can't build on it. Nothing's really changed. He's not being harmed from the time he purchased the property to now if this isn't granted. Okay, I know he wouldn't be happy because he can't sell that land, but there was nothing that like he bought it back then believing he could have built on that. So I hear people both on the panel here and them talk about like, you know, road sizes when this road was built 20 years ago when this would occur, 40 years ago when this occurred. You know, most of that I wasn't here. I don't know if that actually occurred or how it occurred, but we're talking today. And today, this is the zoning laws. It doesn't meet them zoning laws, and there's nothing in my mind, and I could be wrong on here, special in this situation that says, you know what, to make things right and fair for this gentleman, we need to give him the variance. Again, I could be wrong. There could be stuff here that I don't completely understand, the legal and
Well, the only
aspects
thing
about
I would
it.
add is part of the bylaws, there are dimensional requirements, but there's also this board that was created to address concerns that people have. And it's the only form of appeal that they have above the zoning laws.
And I get that, and I understand, and I'm glad that this exists, because there needs to be where someone can appeal. And I think the appeal process is for something that is unfair, or something that you guys can look at and say, you know what, this isn't right, it wasn't right, shouldn't have been right. But if you're saying the law, the bylaw is wrong, then maybe you do something about changing the zoning law, and then you don't have this problem. But we do have that zoning law, okay? It doesn't meet it, and there's nothing in my mind that I can see that makes this case special, where he would be harmed from the time he bought the property to now.
I just asked, can I ask you a couple of questions? You went back to when he bought it. Let's go back a little further, because I've born in town and I've lived here all my life.
Okay.
This was used by a gentleman that was in the construction business as a site where he was operating machinery.
Okay.
You wouldn't like that either. He was knocking all the trees down,
Okay.
taking the loom out, gravel. The zoning would allow it to become a farm. You wouldn't like a big farm there. I mean, a lot of things you wouldn't like there. I'm looking at 4 individual houses, that might be the best thing. However, I'm taking into account, as we like to go up and down a river, we could put in a buffer zone to those houses. We could put in 150 feet, say, 100 feet,
Well, that was probably
buffer from the edge of the river.
I mean, that should be the planning.
Well, we can write anything we want as far as our acceptance of it.
And you had mentioned to me, and the good questions, that if there were machinery up there 50 years ago, say, and the guy, did he have all the correct permits, and was he following all the proper?
There was no rules.
And to my point, so there was nothing preventing him from doing it. There was nothing said that you can't or can do this or you need this. So, yes, I wouldn't have liked it.
No, what I was pointing it out, some of these things are allowed. Farms are allowed,
Yeah.
because it's enough acreage. Once this is broken up, you can't put farms in, aren't allowed. The gravel business that he was running, because it came before zoning, could have been continued onto this state.
Like I had said earlier,
Non-conforming use is allowed to continue.
if he met all the requirements and 4 houses were put there, I had already mentioned that it was personal and I wouldn't like that. I'm taking that off the board and saying, okay, so my like or dislike should have no impact on here, but what should have impact on here is that the fact that you got, that we do have a zoning law right now that it doesn't meet, okay, and there's nothing, and I can understand there could be special situations where you're gonna allow people not to follow them.
No.
I just don't see where there's a special situation.
You can put a farm, you can
And-
put a pig farm.
Right, so that's why I'm saying, to my point being, if they put a.
Could be something that didn't like.
Okay, you asked
I
me.
mean, he can reach this.
Yeah, if they did
Now
put a,
it's got roads in.
if they did put a pig farm up there and it met all the requirements, again, no, I wouldn't like it. But that's your responsibility, is not whether I would like it or not like it. I mean, you take that into consideration, my opinion, but that's not your responsibility as a board, whether I would like it or not. Your responsibility is the zoning laws, and what, in my interpretation, is unique in this situation that makes following those zoning laws okay not to do. And I'm just
That's
saying,
what the
it,
board is here for.
right, exactly, and so my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that there's nothing in this situation that rises to the level that says, you know what, we need to let somebody break our zoning laws.
No, it's not breaking.
No one's breaking
No,
anything.
it's
Or
not
change
breaking.
them momentarily.
No, it's to vary from the strict terminology there. Right? And I think we get your point. You don't want it there, won't look pretty to you, or it will be a pain to you to endure. And we get that, but it's this board's obligation to look to see if there is something unique about this particular situation. And I gotta tell you, I was on the planning board for a bunch of years, I've been on the zoning board for also a bunch of years. I've never seen a situation like this. I mean, this is clearly unique to me, and I don't know how many other people have seen what should clearly be an A&R plan, which would be signed off in 2 seconds.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
Approval not required. So if Mass Electric Company didn't own that property,
Mhm.
then it's crystal clear, they're gonna build 4 lots, period. It doesn't matter if someone doesn't like it, it's not
Correct.
relevant.
In other words, just to clarify that, if someone had presented a piece of land that same size and there wasn't that 60-foot bed, what he's saying is it would go to for a building permit and be granted with no approval, no subdivision approval required.
And I totally understand that, but if I was 7 feet tall, I'd be playing for the Celtics. There is a 60-foot zone there that does exist.
Which is why they are here,
Okay,
to say there is a uniqueness to the situation.
okay.
And because of that uniqueness, we're looking for a variance. That is the reason why this board is here.
And I get that, and that's why I said, in my opinion, I do not believe that that is something, the property when it was purchased, he couldn't have built there. Okay, so it wasn't like he bought the property, said, I'm gonna build here. Okay, started to build and you guys shut him down and said, well, you're missing it. He bought the property, couldn't build there. Now, 35, 40 years later, he still knows that there's that land going there, and he's trying to figure out a way how he can build on property that he knew when he purchased he couldn't build on. I don't blame him for doing it, I would do it. I would do it.
It's obvious that you don't know what he knew back when he purchased the property.
Absolutely.
Right, so you believe that he may have
Absolutely.
known, but you want to let the board know that you don't have any knowledge along those lines.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, absolutely. And I'm not arguing that. But again, I can use certain kind of logic to say, he said he owns, I guess, he owned another 18 acres.
I own 40 acres.
So he owns 40 acres there. Someone who, buys 40 acres, builds a couple property on that land, and doesn't know what he can and can't do with that land. You're right, I don't know exactly what he knew, but I can do a little inference. And maybe you can't, like maybe you are not allowed to infer what he knew by the evidence or whatever. Maybe you can't do that, and I totally understand that. And at the end of the day, I don't know how much say I have here or whatever. That's my thought on that. I just don't see, regardless of my personal, how it's gonna affect me. And if he does build them, you know, I'm gonna live with it, and it's gonna just bother me. But you know, when I'm hearing the noise or whatever, but I'm gonna live with it. But I just come back to, in my opinion, there's nothing here that makes this rises to the level where it should be allowed. But that's your job. Okay, thank you for your time, I appreciate it. And I apologize if I get a little animated.
No,
and-
everything's
Yeah, I
fine.
apologize.
No worries.
You did a good job.
Larry, when you bought that land, was there any houses across the river?
Yeah, right now, it's
No,
12
I mean,
houses on it
when you
now.
bought this land way back when, were all the development across those?
Just 2 new houses on
Just two
Fay
and that's
Lane.
it, before all
Everybody
those?
else was there, Goonins, all old families, you know.
Yeah,
Was the auction.
No, no, across the river.
across the river,
When Masco built.
Oh,
nothing,
you
how
know,
much?
I don't say anything about all the guns being shot off from across the river over to my way. I don't
Yeah.
complain about those things. I don't wanna get started on something that
The paint guns that go back there, yes, it
doesn't matter,
happens.
it's on the other side of the river.
It does. And I hear it too, it bothers me, but.
Anybody else that would like to be heard on the matter, or?
We have some other people back there that don't want to.
They're friends of Larry's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just one comment about it. I mean, hey, Larry bought this land. I own land, and you know, when you buy, I bought land. I live in Charlton now, and I bought land for quiet enjoyment. Okay. Years ago, when I sold the town the parkway, you know, where the bandstand is, I owned all that, and I sold it, and I was able to buy land across the street from my house. Then there was some landlocked land, I bought that. And then the old farm that I bought the land from, I bought his house to protect myself. Well, he and his wife built a nice little ranch house. Then they passed on, they left it to the granddaughter in Maine, she came in, and they're running a junkyard there, even though it's illegal, okay? So you buy this for quiet enjoyment, like you like to have, like that gentleman like that. Larry actually bought it for quiet enjoyment, but the time said, well, hey, someday when I get old, I can sell it, you know, so someday is right. We're all getting older. But I mean, that's what it is. And like I said, the other thing that makes this unique is the fact that, hey, we went out and we, you know, were able to have an agreement to buy the right of way that allows us to come see. If we didn't have the right of way, we wouldn't be here. And that's the best we can
And
do.
I've approached all my neighbors, the people that live there, that could be affected by lights coming out, people coming out of their driveways. And we've sat down and picked spots so that if cars come out of here, they don't shine in their houses. So all my neighbors got the same letter, and they're not here to say that we don't want that. And it's gonna add maybe 4 cars to our road.
So let me ask, the depth of these lots,
Yeah, they're,
Yeah, about
500 feet?
approximately, one's 398, one's 487, one's 499, and one's 495, 501.
They're deep lots.
And how far back,
1.7 acres.
no,
Well,
how
well,
far back do you envision from the?
About 110 feet from Hope Ave.
For homes, you're asking.
That's what I'm asking, is
Yeah.
where the homes would be situated.
So even if the guy had, if he's 110 feet back and he had 200 on his pad, there's gonna be still a buffer. I mean, you got the flood zone there, that's no build. You know, unless some guy wants to have a giant lawn or something, but, I mean, there's plenty of back room. That's a pretty big, deep lot.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question if I could. I see that the grant of easement and agreement doesn't have a signature page. Is it signed?
Well, their lawyer sent Larry's lawyer a letter. And basically, the only reason it's not signed is they said, go see if it's approved. Because quite frankly, I mean, if it's not approved, Larry's not gonna be able to afford
Yeah,
the
but
$30,000.
After you jump through all these hoops, it's going to be signed?
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's in escrow now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Would you consider leaving a 100-foot buffer zone between the road and the bank
Well, you
of
know,
the property?
Well, you have the
Yeah,
wetlands thing.
People going up and down the
But
river?
you have to widen the wetlands. I mean, here's an example. This is similar to when Mr. Silverman was on the planning board. I'm gonna test memory. Remember when I went for the zone line on the north of the west side of Old Webster Road? Because the lot line went back, but it didn't go back to my property line. So I came in and I said, can you push it back? This is across from IPG. And then Mr. Stevens came along, he owned the land, and he says, I want a 200-foot buffer zone because I have a tree farm. I don't know if you remember that. And I said, okay, if you give me a 200-foot buffer zone on your land, I'll give you a 200. He said, no, I might want to develop it someday. And we all had a laugh. Do you remember that? And then,
Vaguely.
but at the end of the day, you know, the planning board sponsored my zoning amendment to bring the line back. Years later, I sold to Wilson. We put up a building for him, and I'll tell you what, that didn't hurt anybody. It didn't hurt the Stevens property, and
Nice building.
I think Wilson's is a
Nice
great
building.
asset to the town.
Absolutely.
You know, so, then the other point I make is, every day I read in the paper, I read the business, Boston Business News, and the Metro West News, and, you know, the Worcester Business Journal. And the big thing coming down the road that's gonna impact our economy is housing, housing, housing. And I said, gee, you know, I'm not in the housing business, but I'm in the construction business. And I can't believe a basic house today, if you went out and bought a lot, you could find a lot in Oxford for $50,000 or $60,000, and you build a house, it's $400,000. I mean, you know, that would be for like a 3-bedroom ranch, you know? And it's like, these are all the things that, there's a scarcity of land, there's, you know, the time it takes, I mean, the expense to survey that railroad and survey these lots along the river, it's unbelievable what it costs today. And, okay, we're creating 4 lots, that's the bottom line. And we wish it was a perfect world that we could have bought the land, but we couldn't.
That 100-foot buffer zone you're talking about, the French River is, let's say, 75 feet wide. And 50 feet in from that on both sides is all trees, small.
Well,
the whole length of
well,
this
the other
property.
thing is to go
I know
100 feet.
people that
Like
do
want
go-
another 100 feet?
I know people that go up and down the river with a
Oh, my
canoe.
son does, all the
Yeah,
time.
but
Fish,
here's the other consideration. You got a 100-foot buffer zone from the river, okay? Yeah, this zone line doesn't mean nothing. It's a river, you got the 100-foot buffer zone, okay? So that is, to go in and say, okay, I wanna cut the trees in the buffer zone, the Conservation Commission's gonna say, well, for what reason? It's not a limited project to alter that area. You know, and I don't know what is it, 25 or 50-foot no touch anyway?
Right, I don't know what the conservation setbacks are, but there are required setbacks from wetlands, from riverfront. I think riverfront is even stricter
Oh,
than
that's right, yeah,
wetlands.
yeah, you got the
I don't know
river,
if it's
yeah.
100 feet or 200 feet, but there already
It's
is
100
a buffer from the riverfront.
And what can't they do in that buffer zone? They can't.
Like,
Typically, you
anything that
can't
they have to
build,
go
you
to
can't take
conservation.
trees down.
The only way you could do it is, let's say you were along the riverfront and you were gonna build a bridge across it or something, you know? And then I think if you have a limited amount of land and you had to build a house within it or something, or put a septic system back there, you could have the septic system has to be 50 feet from the wetland, but it'd only be like that 1,000 square foot septic system. You have to have a reason, like, you know, anything, there's always, if you cross a wetland or do anything, it's called a limited project. So it's like, okay, what is your limited project, you know? Clearing out the trees to see the river probably isn't a limited project. But, you know, there is that 100-foot protection that, I'm sorry, what did you say, your name, Mr. Dolan? Mitch, okay. Yeah, he gets another shot when they build, if someone is gonna come disturb this within the buffer zone, he's got another shot before the Conservation Commission.
They wouldn't be building, but you'd have to go to conservation. I think it's 100 feet.
Yeah, it's 100, yeah, the buffer zone is 100 feet, so,
So that's already in existence.
yeah.
All right, any other questions? I don't know, I haven't had a chance to review these 2 packets that came tonight. I don't know if anybody feels that they need time to review them? No? Okay. So, nobody else has anything else to add? All right, so I guess we'd be looking for a motion to close the public hearing. That would mean no more discussion on the matter, other than the board, and then deliberate.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so now we would vote to close the public hearing.
I'm sorry, who was second?
Al? Dan?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Dave?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So now, at this point, not sure if you want to deliberate further, if you want to discuss. Otherwise, we'll be looking for a positive or negative motion to consider the appeal from the applicant. As it's stated, if we're going to go forward with either way, this would be for 4 separate variances, 1 tied to each lot. I also heard possible conditions that were talked about before. I'm not sure if these are resolved, but there was talking about 42-foot width, safety officials.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
confirming.
on that, assuming, Mary had said that they're going to have to submit the subdivision plan approval. That's really the bailiwick of the planning board.
And that is probably a good point, just from the standpoint that if we do approve anything tonight, the applicant is still required to submit a subdivision plan to the planning board and obtain their approval of the subdivision.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if they end up having to go for a common driveway, 2 common driveways to serve 2 lots each, there are road width specifications in our zoning bylaw and our subdivision rules and regs.
Are they,
I don't know what they are off the top of my head. I could
is that,
share the zoning book with you.
does that mean they would potentially need another variance after the fact of?
I think I don't think the road width for a common driveway needs to be 42 feet.
Yeah, I
think it's
find that
I
hard.
thought it
less
was, I
than
thought
that.
it was 24, you know.
Well, I guess when I talked to the railroad, the thing was to build 2 houses, but have 2 roads, 2 separate things going into each house. I think that's where we come up with the 21 feet and 21 foot. And when
But are you gonna treat them as common drive?
just
like
a driveway, a simple dirt driveway.
But you're not gonna have like a division down the middle and, this house must use this part of it and this house must use.
However, suppose I was to sell all 4 lots to one person.
No,
There's a whole bunch of things you could do there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the worst case is we said, okay, what if it's 21 foot for a common driveway, for a driveway? Okay, maybe that's where the 42 foot came from. Okay, you could have a driveway here and a driveway here. That's why, the lots are in the middle, if that came up. But that's gonna be, when we go back to the planning board,
That's
it's
part
gonna
of the
be their
planning board's
discretion.
hearing.
So,
Okay. Okay, I guess I was under the impression that you were going for common driveways, but,
But, at one time, that was something that planning boards, put into, so you wouldn't have curb cuts every 150 feet. Yeah, that's, when the master plan and the professional plan is coming in, or central mass planning has a form, they say, oh, hey, this way we're gonna have half as many driveways, and it's less of an impact in stormwater management, and then, and that's a great idea, and then they change it again, but, so anyway, it's like, once again, they get the 42 feet, and someone's going, and probably a friend from National Grid said, okay, hey, this should give you what you did want, and this is what I'm gonna give you. So that's what it was, but, and I can see where, hey, you do a cross easement here, and they have to go, is that a public hearing for a common driveway?
special permit, yes.
Special
public
permit,
hearing.
yeah, so we go in and they say, okay, hey, come in here, and then we wanna take, Al's idea, okay, hey, we'll make a turnaround or a bubble here or whatever, between them. So, so basically that's another battle for another day.
Yeah, and the point being that it's something that you're gonna have to address with the
Yeah,
planning board.
we knew this wasn't gonna be this is an interim meeting, we know it back.
All right, how about the other things that I heard talked about was circle or loop at the end of the 42 foot, apparently that would probably go if it's gonna be separate driveways, but again,
Kind of up to the planning board and stuff.
okay, that's what that is.
May I add something else too? So when each of these lots ends up being developed, they would need stormwater management approval. If none of the work was going to be done within the buffer of the wetland river, they would all have to go to the planning board for
Site
stormwater
plan.
management and disturbance permits as well. And we do get fire department input on that for fire vehicle access. Sometimes if it's a particularly long driveway, the fire department we'll work with the developer to get a turnaround put in or something like that.
Okay.
Well, that's what you were talking about, wasn't that some 60-foot diameter thing, and then you could go to each house?
But that will be
That'll be,
something.
that'll be planning board, site plan review, so to speak, with the stormwater management.
Well, those are all things that would have to happen if this went to the planning board anyways?
Absolutely, yes.
What about the easement, the grant of easement not yet signed? Does that
Well,
need
if-
to be a contingency of some kind?
If the grant of easement doesn't get signed, they don't have any legal right to access the property.
I guess.
Yeah, game over.
Yeah, that's it, done.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so, or anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I think we've covered everything well.
Okay.
What do we need to, what are we trying to approve?
I think what's being requested is, if I'm understanding this correctly, it says vary the frontage requirement for the proposed subdivision. Building enforcement officer stating there would have to be 4 separate, each lot, but varying the frontage requirement. So that would be a motion to approve or deny the varying of the frontage requirement to, I guess, to state that it's not, because there's not actual frontage.
I think probably what the motion would read would be to, based upon the plan presented to us.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're not taking any
Sorry.
more input.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, amongst the board, variance to waive frontage requirement as, because it's not actually abutting the street, or?
They
Yes.
have 0 frontage.
I'm sorry, say again?
They have 0 frontage,
Yes.
basically. I mean,
The way it's written in the legal notice is to vary the frontage requirement, so,
On each of the noted lots, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
so,
plan, reference the plan too.
so I can't make a motion. Obviously, we have the criteria for variances that was read. That should be referenced in the motion. 4 individual lots. We've got 4 individual,
I'll start the ball. I move that we provide the 4 variances needed
each one.
being for lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 for frontage. And being the reason that they meet the requirements for variances, and I don't think we need to list the 4 requirements.
Do you have any findings that you want to state, or? All right, so first of all, we need, it's got to be 1 lot at a time. You can't do 4 at once.
Fine, so move for lot number 1, to vary the frontage requirement.
All right, reference the plan, or?
Can I add that?
Yeah,
So
we
go ahead.
haven't,
Add, as shown on the plan of land, plan of land, Hope Avenue, Oxford, Massachusetts, prepared for record owner. Lawrence S. Crowley, book 44063, page 153, prepared by Telfer Land Surveying Operator.
okay, so that's the motion.
That's the motion.
All right,
Second.
second, all right, call for the vote. Dan?
Yes, agreed.
Aye.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's lot 1. Unfortunately, we have to do that 4 times.
Move that lot 2, the frontage requirement be varied as requested, and Al, if you wouldn't mind.
I mean, Mary has that.
Yeah,
Lot
I
2
showed
is
on
shown
the
on
plan.
the plan presented to us.
Second.
Okay, so we have the motion and the second.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
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 Mr. Chairman, I move that lot 3, the variance for frontage required as requested be allowed. Lot 3 being the lot on the plan, Mary did.
As shown on a plan.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a second, Dan?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
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 And Mr. Chairman, last and but not least, I move that we allow the requested variance on lot 4 on Mary on the plan that we have previously referenced.
Second. Dan, the vote?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, folks, you are granted to the next step. You've got to take it to the planning board and jump through the hoops that they're gonna have for you. You realize there's a 20-day appeal period.
This would feel we're swimming down the street instead of. Thank you very much for your considerations.
All right, so we have other business before the board tonight. There was quite a bit of information in the packet as we haven't met in a while. Not sure, let's see where to start. So, I'm going to read this. Mary had provided So, just kind of a summary of what happened in 2019. The zoning board of appeals meets on Thursday evenings as needed. To hear and decide on applications for variance, special permits of appeals, or administrative zoning actions as prescribed under the town of Oxford zoning bylaws and Mass General laws. Board members are appointed by board of selectmen. Each application would involve one or more public hearings, in some cases site visit. The board acted on 2 special permit requests and 3 variances in 2019. I would have
It's a
thought
slow year.
I would have thought it was more than that, okay? At the close of the year, members consisted of myself, Stephen Balkunas, clerk, members Al St. Germain, Dave Silverman. So alternate members are Michael Tomasi and Tom Purcell. Ryan Avery, who served as vice chairman, tendered his resignation in 2019. So that's a segue into the next item. We don't really have a vice chairman at present. Also, Tom, I did talk with Tom Purcell. He is an alternate member. He's agreed to become a regular member, a full-term member. Right, so he'd be the 5th full-time member. But no one seems to want the vice chairmanship.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, there's always a consequence to not appearing at meetings. You may decide not to appear and you may end up being voted into a position.
You know, vote me as vice chairman? Oh, I get it. So someone who's not here could be voted in. So you better keep showing up at the next meetings. I guess the way it works is if I'm not here, then someone else is going to have to fill in for the chairmanship. And I understand if it's not a vice chairman, I believe it falls to the, do we call him the clerk or the secretary?
Secretary
I
is.
thought it was secretary. It's
Yeah.
written in here as clerk, but,
Okay.
so,
No jokes to be made given the title.
right, so.
Al help me.
So I don't know that we need to come up with an answer
Al, how do you feel
tonight.
about being vice chair?
Okay.
How do you feel about it? Vice chair?
Well, how do you feel about being vice chair?
Well, I look at the odds.
I'm sorry?
I look at the odds.
I'm
He's
not-
here most of the time. So, one time out of the year is not gonna kill him.
So what are you saying? You would want to do that?
I guess if I'm not here, we got 2 gentlemen right next to me that'll can fit the role also.
Well, if Stephen does ask to step up for this, or is okay with it, then we would look for someone to step into his role, secretary, reading the legal notices, et cetera. So that person will be third in line. I mean, I don't think we have to have an answer tonight, but I think it's
Yeah, we're
something.
just gonna nominate Tom Purcell.
Good. There you go.
So, I mean, we can think about it, and we can talk about it next time we get together.
Point Dave right now, it's over, done.
All right, let's see, so as far as other business tonight, so just a heads up that we have the zoning determination, Mary, I don't know if everybody caught this, but she thinks there'll be a hearing in the future for 254 Sutton Ave for a self-storage facility, and there is a document that came in the packet with a very brief description of that.
Where is 254?
Butler Fuel, right on Sutton Ave,
Oh.
across from Joe Jenny.
I mean, there's a lot of land back there. Did the family close the business down?
They have the fuel company, I don't believe is there any longer.
Well, it would probably be a good place.
Yeah, the one in
It's-
Millbury bought the
Right.
rights, I bought the customers.
Pre-existing
Is this-
non-conforming,
that's CK Smith.
because it was a commercial use in a residential zoning district. So any change, expansion, et cetera, would require special permit from zoning board of appeals.
I mean, it's, you know, a storage facility is not a heavily used facility. You know, you got the cars that will come in and out, but, you know, it's not like it's a retail facility.
That is a tough corner, though, with cars coming in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can always have, what's the term? De-acceleration and acceleration
Correct.
lane?
So they would have to, if they ended up going to ZBA and were granted approval by ZBA, they would still have to go to planning board for site plan approval, and because there are wetlands in proximity to where they would want to locate their self-storage buildings, they'd have to go to conservation as well.
How far back is the wetlands from the road?
I don't know.
Some right across the street, I think, but.
Yeah, I think it goes back and veers to the left on wetlands, because on the right you got,
But is it on the
Mass-
same
Mass
side of the
Electric again.
property? Is the wetlands on
I
on
think
that
it's
same?
way in the back in the corner.
Because on the other side of the street, yeah, but I didn't think there was any back.
But then you get Mass Electric on the right side, power lines right there. Then Singletary's land comes up, I think up way up in the back.
For point of-
Anyway, they haven't officially applied yet, but I like to
So no other.
give you guys
meetings,
copies of the
Potential.
zoning potential.
So just for point of reference tonight, could we voted one time, or do we have to vote 4 times?
You know, the way the building inspector wrote his memo
Made
for
it sound like
tonight,
4.
made it sound like you needed to grant 4 separate variances, which is what you did, so
All
I
right.
think.
Couple other items in the packet. One is, looks like it's time to look into the, what's it called, the ethics, the conflict of interest law summary and ethics online training. So I don't know if you've done that yet, Dan.
I did.
I haven't done it in a while. I guess it's probably up for renewal, but, so.
Yeah, you're supposed to do it every 2 years. And I don't have everybody's email address, so I didn't forward it to you, but I figured I would just print it out and give it to all of you.
So that's something we're gonna look into. And then the last item, I think, unless there's any other business, but there was a note in our packet from the library director and the library board of trustees talking about digital signage. You know, wanting, I did read it before, a few weeks ago, but sounded like wanting to put up a digital sign at the library. As Mary, we were talking earlier that in whatever this district is called, what, village business?
Village business.
The digital signs are not allowed. That's why there's not one in front of the town hall. And she provided a copy of the current sign bylaw, or the signage portion of our bylaws. So nothing's before us. I don't know if this is something that they're gonna push for a motion at to change zoning at town hall, at town meeting?
Well,
or-
it would have to be approved by the voters at town meeting, it would have to be an amendment to the zoning bylaw. But where the Board of Appeals was involved in rewriting our sign bylaw back in 2013. I know, it's a while ago.
Who did that?
Excuse me?
Who did that?
Yeah.
Did we vote on it, or did we?
No, it was
It was
discussed.
discussed.
Yeah, it was discussed.
It was probably around the time
So there
after
was-
we approved the first couple of these.
Yeah, there was input from zoning board of appeals members, because you ultimately end up being the permit granting authority for signs that need special permits larger than
Well, you know, if the-
32 square feet.
if the town is looking to bring business in, you know, a real restrictive sign bylaw is kind of telling businesses, look, you know, please don't come here, we don't want you.
Well, so the Village Business District is your downtown area. It's also on the National Historical Register from Front Street to Clover Street, is on the National Historic Register. So a very important part of the master plan is to keep the historical nature of the downtown area.
What did you say, Front Street to?
Front
Clover?
Street to Clover?
Clover, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when the sign bylaws were being written back in 2013, we didn't want the digital blinking, moving signage in the downtown area, so it was actually prohibited. So it was prohibited in what was the central business of, so I gave you a copy of the sign bylaw. Section 5.5 is animated and changeable message signs. And 5.5.2 used to say electronic message board signs are prohibited in the central business and central professional, but now, and all residential zoning districts. Now it's changed to the village business. Animated changeable signs, electronically activated, are allowed upon the grant of a special permit by the zoning board of appeals in all business and industrial zones except village where they are prohibited.
Did we have, was it Hometown Liquors that came before us a couple of years ago for
Yes.
relief for their sign?
Yes. So the way the bylaw was written back then, it was central business, central professional, and I believe 240 Main Street, where Hometown Liquors was central business. Now it's village business.
They have a sign here, or we can grant it?
They do not have a digital sign.
But they were looking for something, and I can't remember if it was for a digital sign, but if they have, you know, a special next week for, you know, XYZ beer, so much a 6-pack or a case, it was that sort of a thing.
Right.
And
We refer to them in here as electronic message board signs, digital message board signs.
so was that denied then?
I
Or
don't
did they-
remember,
or
I
did
think
they
he
re-
withdrew.
withdrew
I
it,
think he withdrew
okay.
without prejudice, yeah.
Okay.
When you classify village,
Mm-hmm.
what do we have up and down Main Street here? We got a town hall, we got a remake of What's the Five, and a bright green sign, which isn't historical looking. Nothing's gonna go across the street in the town property where the common is. You get the church, houses down. I mean, I'm looking at,
You have the old Bank of America branch that's gonna be auctioned off,
yeah.
and,
So if you go the other way, I mean, I
that should
understand this.
be, you know, a commercial,
I understand historical part of certain things. Now we got a big empty lot down there that's commercial, that's up for sale. what's gonna pop into that place?
Next to the,
Three or
next to the
4
law firm?
years.
Yeah, the house that burnt down, that
Oh,
was,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that
That's-
was over 200 years old.
Yeah, but that's been empty
So-
for a long time.
Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, I'll revert back to Charlton. That sign they got, black, white letters,
Right. So I
it's
believe that's,
very eye-catching when you come down it, but it doesn't take away, that's a historical section. I
So
mean, all
that's-
those houses there are over 200 years old.
that's the point that the library director is making in her letter, that electronic signs can be tasteful and not be ugly. So-
But,
they would want
but how do we
there.
put that,
But,
how do we
well,
put that
that's-
into a
that's just
bylaw?
exactly it.
Because unfortunately, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder.
Right, so there could be certain design standards required, if they were to be allowed in the village business zoning district. It could be written in a bylaw that certain design standards have to be followed. I have to do some research.
I'm wondering if you
actual
were able to
bylaws.
reach out, and I don't know if we would need to take a vote to ask you to do
No.
this, but there are a couple of sign companies right around here. There's actually one right off of Main Street. Is it Flint?
On Howard,
It's
That's
the
not
first
Howard.
house going up the hill after the old
is
Manny's.
that Howard Road?
Harwood?
Howard, on the right.
You know where the old Manny's?
Yeah.
Holbrook Road. It's a
Thank you,
Holbrook.
Holbrook. I think it's the first, his home and his business, it's the first property after the old Manny's.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was Flint signs.
Yeah, he doesn't do any electronic, he does carving.
Oh, okay. You could reach out to a company like that,
Reach out to a sign company?
a sign company, yes, to
Yeah.
get even industry word usage. Because, look, yeah, you don't want big neon signs, every few feet going down Main Street.
Exactly.
But at the same point in time, if we want business to develop, then we have to show them that we're looking to have them come here. And a lack of signs is a real problem, and not just for a retail store, but how about a law office, an accounting office, an engineering office? We have to be more welcoming with our signs.
You know, what's a good example is a couple that started that little bakery.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the florist behind them. They kind of bounded up putting signs there. I mean, they've got a few things there, but.
You wouldn't know there's anything back there.
Right, and it takes away when you go down, and they're restricted of what they have to have there, And I says, it's not doing them any justice. Now, they spent the money to open up the bakery, but according to our ancient bylaws on signs, it restricts them from turning around and developing that business, or, so, I mean, like you said, it's just, it's how it's presented, and that's. the
And
biggest thing.
and that's the first step is, hey, come here, you can have a sign. It has to be a tasteful sign, and there might need to be some back and forth about how we're gonna define tasteful. But I think that some lighting capacity is reasonable.
So, sounds to me like you, as a group, would be amenable to,
Is a word.
changing the sign bylaw. Yes,
Just for myself, yes, I think it is something that a town looking to attract businesses needs to
do.
We didn't initiate the earlier one, 2013. We may have contributed to it, but we didn't initiate that, did we? Wasn't that town,
I think,
I mean, we had had a couple of cases come before us, and there was no clear direction.
there was no
because-
clear direction, exactly. So I think this the zoning bylaw clarified it.
But did we pick the zoning districts that these would be allowed in, or we just
I-
kind of
I
went
think-
more for what the?
I remember speaking with the previous chairman, and we also had the
Was that-
historical commission
Was
chair.
that Mike back then?
Yes.
And who was
chairman.
that? Who was the historical
Oh,
chair?
Gene
Gene
O'Reilly. Yep, yep. So we had
Because I know
input.
there was, trying to think, the signs, McDonald's was one of them,
McDonald's,
and
there
was the other
was,
one up on Route 20?
there was one at
He closed
the
down,
Mardi Gras Club on Route 20.
yeah, Centerfolds or whatever it was.
Is that club still there?
No,
No.
No.
he didn't even open up. At that time, he just closed everything down. Now, just think about if that place went into a restaurant.
The one at
It won a nice sign.
Sad's Mill, it used to be Sad's
Yeah.
Mill.
Okay.
They put something in there, we had to do something with the sign.
I guess it'd be, so you provided the sign bylaw, that has what the current,
That has what the current requirements are for
well,
digital
I guess
signage.
maybe we should all review that then and see where we think it needs. It sounds like we're either talking about relief from which zoning districts it's allowed in, or because it's allowed in other districts, right?
It is allowed in all other business and industrial zoning
It's
districts.
just not, it says, I just happened to open up to the page, they're
With
prohibited.
a special permit,
They're prohibited in the village business and in all residential districts.
right.
So,
No, it's limited, it's not.
well, it's
required.
limited, but in theory, most businesses are not gonna be in zoning in
Right.
Right.
residential districts. And other than the village business district, which is from Front Street to Clover Street, everywhere else is allowed, business-wise,
Correct,
with a
yes.
permit.
So is that the town saying, hey, businesses, we want to make sure that you are not located here?
No, I
Go
don't think
elsewhere.
so.
You mean in this little
I
In
district?
this
think
little
it-
district?
I think it was
They
to,
wanted to keep the historical,
Nature.
you know, there was a lot of push for the history of
Well,
Oxford.
you know,
Yeah.
the wideness of Main Street, awesome. Definitely you should keep that. But as far as the ambiance, you know, a lot of the old trees, you know, have gotten sick and are down. So, I mean, you have a lot of the old homes, and, you know, maybe at some point in the future, you know, you're gonna have a larger business that's gonna wanna buy up a bunch of them.
I guess I can see it both ways, and one side of it is, okay, the library would like to have one there. Town hall would like to have one, so they can put up their notices of what's going on as a ZBA meeting. And then you could see 20 of these between Front Street and Clover Street, driving down the street.
But if we're gonna let the library do it, and we're gonna let town hall do it, could there be a reason why we're not gonna let someone else do it?
No, and I think that's the funny part is that the town has the bylaw, and it's the town that is saying they would like to put something up. It's not the businesses that are saying it.
right,
Isn't the
Yeah.
town exempt from all the bylaws?
Yes.
I don't know, are they?
I think they were.
well, right at the first chapter of this bylaw, sign bylaw, this chapter shall not regulate traffic and directional signs or any sign installed or required by the town of Oxford, the Commonwealth of Mass, the United States of America.
It's good to be the king.
Yeah. So,
Is this
in essence,
Yeah,
the
but don't-
town could be exempt.
Well, unless you read that to get to the point of municipal signage. And the library isn't looking for that. The library is looking to advertise things.
The library is looking to advertise community events,
Hmm.
so it's not, yeah.
So they, you know, they'd have to come here. And I think they should definitely be allowed to do it. But likewise, I think that another business on Main Street should be able to come before us and get appropriate signage. And
But,
what,
we
what
don't
is
want
it,
it-
36 inches, 32 inches?
32,
32 inches or square feet? What are we talking-
32 square feet.
Square feet, 4 by 8.
Sorry, 32 square feet is your maximum.
But not lit.
No, they can be backlit, they
They
can be
can be
lit, they
backlit,
can be lit.
yeah, yeah. They just can't be digitally
They can't be
moving a
lit.
message all the time like McDonald's.
But how many people pay attention to McDonald's?
Nobody.
Barely
Yeah.
No,
can
that's
see.
what and if you look up and down Main Street, look at all the land or businesses. Who's really gonna spend 20 grand, 15 grand for electronic sign?
So,
I mean, from here down to the high school. Nobody,
I mean.
you know, I mean, it's just so if you look at the percentage, it's really low who's gonna turn around and put a sign up. You know, none of those houses are gonna go. Anything that's gonna go is gonna be down Sutton Ave. Those houses on the left, somewhere down in the future, those are gonna be gone, something's gonna be there.
Well, we can certainly make it clear to businesses, we want to make sure you're not on Main Street.
I mean, there's nothing left other than like, what happens if somebody buys that land over there, right? And wants to put up a nice business or whatever, it's commercial.
Mhm.
Now, they have to build a thing to look like it was 200 years ago? Or are they gonna put up something that's
So
modern?
in other words, what other restrictions are there, just for
Yeah, I
building?
mean, it just-
Never
so I
mind the
look at-
sign, because you're in the historical district and part of
There-
the National Register. Are
Okay,
there-
so being on the National Historical Register comes with 0 restrictions. If you were on a local register, then there could be restrictions imposed.
Color of paint
Color
and,
of paint.
oh, ridiculous.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, but
So
Be like up in
being on
Sudbury, that whole
the
stretch
National
up in
Register,
Sudbury
there are
is,
no,
Well, how about this as a suggestion?
Restrictions.
Maybe we just take these home and read it, and then, because obviously to change it would have to be through
has to
town
go to,
meeting.
has to go to town
So-
meeting, has to go on, be on the warrant.
I mean, if you want to propose some changes to what's written in here, is it simply striking out that they're not allowed in the village business district, or? I mean, propose changes, and then, I guess, if you're asking, are you asking us to, is the suggestion that maybe we should rewrite this?
No, just I think to get some input,
Okay.
to get a feel of what you thought, since you did have some input in writing the current bylaw.
Off the cuff, I would say, I think the library should be able to put up a sign that can change from time to time, without someone standing out there in the cold, peeling down letters and putting them up to advertise, public events that are going on in there. I think that's reasonable.
There's a lot that goes on in there for kids.
Yeah, and
A lot
it's
that people-
phenomenal.
that people don't know.
When my son was a little kid and we lived across from the bandstand, we used to go down there all the time. It's a great public resource. So yeah, I mean, I think they should definitely be able to put up an electronic sign where the message is going to change from time to time.
Are they exempt, the library?
I don't know, Al, 100%, I don't know the answer to that, if they're
I mean,
exempt.
They have exemptions, and basically it says, nor shall it apply to any law, use, or structure necessary for use and occupancy by the town of Oxford for public or municipal purposes.
So they might already have the loophole to get what they.
Yeah, yeah.
Why is the Board of Trustees writing the letter though? Did someone tell them they couldn't do it?
You probably don't know.
Did they look to put it up?
I think they're probably being courteous
Okay.
to approach the different boards before.
So this is
Going
actually,
ahead.
this is
Doing
actually
it.
addressed to members of the planning board.
Because they thought initially that it was the planning board, because the planning board would have to hold a public hearing if the bylaw was changed.
Okay.
But
And if they're exempt, so be it.
yeah,
Or we can use that as a launching board to make sure that businesses aren't turned away.
Yeah.
Just my own opinion, I'm pro-business.
And having a sign at the library could attract business of how they advertise. You know those Disney characters, the one that's blonde, the one that's red, what do you call it? They look like Cinderella, they was always singing and dancing, what the heck was
The
that?
Frozen?
Frozen, there we go.
Sisters?
Anyway, so the two girls that,
I didn't expect it to go here.
the two girls that started that, right?
We
came
talk
over-
about everything at ZBA.
I
Yeah,
guess so.
they came over there and they did a show.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, because one is an actress,
Mm-hmm.
and it was right to the T.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they found out was like through the internet or something. So
Yeah.
I'll use that as an example, that they advertise on that, how many young adults with young kids drive down, I mean, you got the traffic out here that's locked right up to the center of town, they sit there and they look at that.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
God, I didn't know that was coming here.
And they are becoming more commonplace. You said you saw one in Charlton. I know Millbury has.
And Charlton's very soft. It's a black background
Mm-hmm.
with the white,
Yeah.
but it's very, it doesn't blow out at you,
Mhm.
so you see the silhouette from it.
But it's very informative.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot
Oh,
of information.
Oh,
I drive
definitely,
by it
Charlton
on a
does
regular
too, every
basis.
time I go by there, and it's just presented very well.
So, maybe it's allowing an electronic sign, but limiting the number of colors?
Yeah. And right now, the way the bylaw is written, I believe there are limitations.
I think we had talked about limitations on how the frequency of
Yeah.
the message changes.
Yes.
Because it was concerned that it would be, flashing or doing these other things, but, I need to refresh, because
Yeah.
I don't remember what was
So the
written 6 years
intensity of
ago.
illumination and or animation, especially as it
So
may
no
impact
Disney characters, no.
the use of quiet enjoyment.
Why not?
of
No copyright
properties.
Yeah, we
infringement
could
allowed.
sue.
All right,
The frequency of changing message text, especially as it may have an impact on traffic safety. In addressing this issue, the ZBA may review sight distances and speed limits on surrounding roads and the size of the sign. Size of an electronic changeable
You
message
reach out to Charlton, see how
Sign.
they,
shall not exceed
how
one-half
they
the
got
allowable
their
square
criteria
footage
on that
of a
sign.
non-electronic changeable message sign.
they probably just put it up because they're in the town.
If you'd like, I can,
And they got less traffic.
take a look at some other towns' bylaws and see how they have
Sure.
theirs
I
written.
think that's a good start.
Yeah.
Other than that,
But from my own perspective, with an eye to being welcoming to businesses.
I agree with the pro-businessness of that, but I just have the concern that what would happen if there's 20 of these along Main Street? And again, we do allow signage, that can be lit, et cetera, and I don't know that that's precluding businesses from coming and saying, well, I don't want to go to Oxford because I can't have an electronics sign. I don't know that that's, may happen, but I don't know.
But
that
they
there's a
also
law.
might say the size of the sign.
Well, Attorney Flynn down the street has a 32 square foot sign. I think his sign is,
But what
Quite
happens,
large.
what happens if he co-locates a few different lawyers in there?
well, he did co-locate another company and actually put up additional signage.
Was the signage appropriate?
I
Or was
don't
it-
believe that he got any approval.
I didn't even
And that's
know.
another way to do
Are
it.
we still on TV?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I didn't even notice it, all they do is notice his sign. And when you get up in age, you can't see very well, so that being at that size, you can read it. If it's
Mhm.
small,
Yeah,
you can make a U-turn, come back and read it again.
but I believe that is an example of a 32 square foot sign, which I think
It's
is
a pretty good sign.
plenty large enough.
But is it, if he had another couple of lawyers, is it another
Gentlemen.
4x8 sign for each
Handle that
lawyer?
very well.
Or is it,
I wanted
well, you're
to-
part of the same firm, so So your name has to somehow fit in what's already there.
Ideally, yes, it would fit in what is already there. Same thing with Market Basket, Home Depot. They were granted a special permit for a certain size sign that would be inclusive of all of their
All
different
the
tenants.
potential, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to go larger than 32 square feet, according to our bylaw, you need a special permit.
All right, so it's getting late. It's the longest meeting we've probably had in 2 years. You happen to come to the right one, Dan.
That's
So
good.
I don't know if there's any other, I appreciate the help, because we do need it, so.
So I'm glad, I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Is there any other business anybody wants to bring up? Otherwise, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
We'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting, please.
Second.
Second, and the vote?
Yes.
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 All right, thanks, everybody. Good night.